Well, gentlemen, shall we talk about the Infinity Saga? Take a little bit a walk or a trip down memory lane with this 21 movie adventure.
A little bit
Um,
of a palate cleanser,
exactly, exactly.
brief divergence into those 21 movies.
So yeah, I guess I don't know. We just go right into the ranting of it because I know we had some with Civil War of like, oh, this is this, whatever. What Let's start with characters. What characters did you like the most or the least out of Infinity Saga? Who wants? Yeah, go ahead, JC.
Obviously, Ant-Man is the best, the greatest of all time, and always will be. And in terms of like characters I liked the least, it's got to be Captain Marvel for me. I just think that movie was a big flop, in my opinion.
Okay.
But
All right. Before I go to Jake, Winter Soldier, JC, how do you feel about him?
so yeah, that was the big thing, right? Because I was alone after Civil War on the opinion that I wanted him to suffer, and I thought Tony had every right to kill him, and I wouldn't have been upset if Tony killed him, right? Because you guys were on the opposite side of that.
Mm.
Um, I liked him more before Falcon and the Winter Soldier because I thought that show was pretty weak, and I thought that didn't do justice to either of those characters. I've come around on him. Would I have been upset if he was slaughtered brutally in Civil War? No.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tony had every right to kill him. The dude killed his parents. I don't care if he was brainwashed. Still killed his parents. Would have been good justice, retribution, whatever. But I don't feel as strongly against him as I did. But I am largely indifferent to him, I think. But we'll see with the Thunderbolts, I
Sure.
guess.
It's the magic of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Completely indifferent to a character.
Jake, what about you? Infinity Saga. Characters that connected or didn't connect?
Oh, well, actually, it's interesting talking about it in the context of Phase 4, because I think that the original Avengers are the strongest of the batch. Although Guardians of the Galaxy are just as great, if not equal. And then I really like Ant-Man also, Scott Lang. He was great. And then Black Panther. I mean, that was like it's almost hard to pick a favorite because that was like the strength of those first three phases and why I think the whole experiment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe worked was because those characters they created were so strong, and even if you didn't love every movie, you wanted to follow them all through everything.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a cliche, but I do think that the strongest character they created was Tony Stark, Iron Man, and he's basically laid the groundwork and the foundation for what they want all these characters to be. Whether they all achieve that level of success, obviously, is a different story. But he's got that quippy sense of humor, that smart alecky sort of attitude, and that almost like self-aware sense to himself. But it's executed in a really interesting way because he's a character with a lot of layers, and that's there both in the writing and it's there in Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. It's really great. Yeah, and I guess the weakest one was definitely Captain Marvel. I know that's like the almost controversial opinion because there was so much infighting when that movie came out, but I think it's undeniable just looking at the movies the way objectively that Captain Marvel as a character was pretty one note, and I also think that the structure of the movie did a disservice to that character, where you had a character whose story was essentially predicated in her never giving up. That was her character, essentially. She would get knocked down and then get back up again. But they used a flashback structure to the film, which made it so you never actually saw her getting knocked down. It just started like in the middle of her story. So we were just kind of told that she would always get up when she was knocked down. I don't know if that was just like a structure mishap there because they wanted to give it a Born Identity type structure where she's getting her memories back, or I don't know if they just didn't challenge the character enough, but ultimately that's why that character didn't work for me in that movie.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, there was definitely some interesting characters. I will agree Ant-Man was one that another curveball, like kind of took me by surprise, but That was a good performance by, Paul Rudd and obviously that cast. Yeah, Captain Marvel, I don't know if I would put it the weakest. I guess maybe just in comparison, like obviously down at that end. And I agree. It's like just the movie of like, I get it. You have to tell her past, but it was weird in placement of everything. And I can't for the life of me, I don't know if I could recall a bunch of that movie per se, or a lot of details.
I think there was a cat.
Yeah, there was a cat. That wasn't a cat. I think I'm going to go on the opposite side of things in terms of not like heroes, but some villains that kind of stuck out to me that like I got really interested in. I mean, if we're going to be basic, quote unquote, Loki was a big one. I was interested in the first one, but he really took off. And I know Dark World is not everybody's favorite, but like that was one that like he really started gaining steam with me. Obviously Avengers, being the big bad, or what we thought was the big bad at that time. That was interesting, and seeing his journey up until where we are currently has been great. And then I think he's not around anymore, but Mysterio was fantastic. I loved what they did with him in that movie from Far From Home. The little twist of like him being a good guy was interesting, but I get it why they did it that way with the whole illusions and kind of duping everybody and doing it that way. And then I guess for the hero side, but started as a villain. Well, I guess didn't start as a villain, but kind of was a villain in the middle. Winter Soldier. Like having him be this ruthless spy soldier, that was awesome. I know a lot of people put Winter Soldier at the top for good reason, but like those action sequences, the threat that he was, that was awesome. Good look, good moments. Awesome there. He's kind of faltered a little bit with me later on, but because he's a good guy, so it's like, damn, we don't have this ominous threat of him. But for that time period, really enjoyed that. Thought it was awesome. Wish we got a little bit more of it, but I get it in the grand scheme of things. We kind of had to wrap up Cap's story, as we saw with the ending of Endgame. But for that time period, really, really good. Enjoyed that ride and the trip. So, what would you guys say, movie-wise, were the high points and low points for you guys personally for the Infinity Saga? JC? Doesn't have to be like, this was the worst one ever, or this is the best one ever. Just like,
Well, it depends. How do you want me to answer this? You want me to answer this as, like, in my opinion, what as like a film was the best and the worst film, or do we want to throw my biases in there? Because my bias says Ant-Man is the best and greatest film that ever came to be on the face of the planet. But like, if I'm actually talking about really good films, it's not that good of a film.
Right. This may be an unfair question for me to ask you guys, because you guys are both film people, making your own projects and been in that industry. That's a little hard for me to ask, to not have your professional opinion in there. But you know what? I like controversy and discussion in this podcast, so let's go all biased. Like, just personally, what did you enjoy? Didn't have to be the most cinematographic, I don't even know the freaking terminology for it. The most beautiful, the most well-structured, whatever. But what made you enjoy it the most, or not enjoy it the most?
Okay, well, so obviously Ant-Man and the Wasp, two of the greatest movies ever to exist in the history of the planet. Absolutely no flaws. They're perfect. No, but so it's, the more I talk about it, the more interesting it is. I got to go back to kind of what Jake was saying, where, Iron Man is probably one of the greatest characters, but Iron Man, in terms of being a film, is an incredible film. It came at a point where there really weren't any good superhero films. Don't even mention X-Men to me. I won't listen to you. But
they started good, damn it. They started good.
So, yeah, I think Iron Man, like, if you weren't really big into comic books, or like you just weren't really into like Marvel, Iron Man is such a obscure character. Like, so I didn't have a ton of knowledge going into any of this. I've since lost my mind to it a little bit, but to take a character like Iron Man from me, and as a complete outside perspective, make the movie engaging enough that I then just spent the time to watch 54 freaking projects or whatever. And all the good movies, I would say, stem from the fact that Iron Man was so good. It was just a really good foundation, and a lot of it was just payoff of seeing all these characters come together. And yeah, you know, the Avengers movies are great, but the Avengers movies wouldn't have been great if we didn't get introduced to the characters beforehand. So I can't really put them like as these end all be all films because they are relying so heavily on other films. So it's tough. I really there's very few I didn't enjoy. I would say actually, let's just say that it's a cop out answer.
That's fine.
But there's very few movies I didn't enjoy in the Infinity Saga outside of like Captain Marvel and Iron Man 3, I think.
All right. Jake?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, and that's kind of part of what was so special about it was that everything was overall pretty good, often great. And I mean, like for me personally, like you got the obvious ones. I really like Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is probably my favorite one. But like the original Avengers, the original Iron Man, Winter Soldier is great. And then like last two Avengers movies. Um, yeah, they are really just great, which is why like Phase 4 kind of stood out for me in an unfortunate way because you were just sort of like, wait, what happened? um, I also have in terms of my personal like ones I might personally like more than others. I have a real soft spot for the original Captain America: The First Avenger, and for Iron Man 3, which I know is a very controversial thing to say on this podcast. I really like that one. But like I think the only one I really thought like didn't work was Captain Marvel. And even that, there were parts I liked about it. I guess Thor: The Dark World, everyone kind of, you know, makes fun of that one. And that one even it's like it's okay. I think the only part of that that's like really weak for me is the villain is exceptionally weak in that movie. And then like Iron Man 2, like it's like a little bloated, but there's still some interesting stuff in there. So yeah, it's like overall pretty solid. And in a way, I would argue that that was something Marvel mastered was the art of making the non-offensive blockbuster. And I don't mean it in terms of offending good taste. I just mean it in terms of not creating something that would like take you off guard with being bad. I guess you contrast that. Look to the Distinguished Competition when they made Batman versus Superman. And that was bad, but that was bad in a way where you were like, I don't ever want to step in a movie theater ever again. Like I remember seeing that, and it was walking out of that was like walking out of a funeral, just like dead silence. You never got that out of Marvel. At worst, you would have like a middling installment. And in fact, I would say with Phase 4, part of the reason why there's such a growing exhaustion with it is because rather than just getting like a few really terrible ones that put us off the whole thing, it's been lots of middling projects that have slowly let the air out of the balloon. No one shot the balloon like DC has done a couple times now, I guess. It's just been like the air is slowly letting out, and it feels like interest deflated a little bit. So that's my very long kind of veering off topic answer.
Totally fair. So to go along with your guys' answers, do you think, and I know we just talked about Phase 4, but we kind of can bring it back into this point. Do you think it's a case of rose-colored, rose-tinted glasses when looking back at some of the Infinity Saga films? Like, we've kind of alluded to general publics, like lower movies, like an Iron Man 3, Thor Dark World. You know, do you think it's a case of that, of just like, not nostalgia, but oh, those were better than what we currently have? Do you think that plays a part in our feelings towards Phase 4 in general and how we kind of feel those movies are?
I think that the strength of the characters in the original movies made up for a lot of the maybe lesser qualities of those movies that have carried over into these new ones.
Okay.
I would say I don't think the first three phases made 4 look bad. I think 4 was just inherently weaker on its own. And I don't think looking back on the first 3 phases, I view them any better because of how much I disliked 4. I think if you're talking in terms of like filmmaking, this is like really the first time this has ever really happened. Sure. Something of this scope with this interconnectivity and, you know, all these big ballooning budgets and all that stuff. So it's actually it's historical in that sense, and I think that's why it's really cool. It kind of hit, I mean, us. I think had a really good time in our lives where we could go and spend all this freaking hours and hours. I'd be curious to know how many hours watching all this like media and ingesting all this media, and it was just kind of like an icing on the cake thing that they were good for the most part. So I think in that sense, I just think I don't look back on them blindly. I look back on them and like, they're not the greatest movies ever. I don't think any of them deserve Oscars other than like Ant-Man maybe, but it's such a cool, unique thing that no one had ever seen before, and now it's overdone as shit. Now everyone's got interconnected, fucking whatever. But so it's not the same now as it was back then, because back then it was brand new and no one had ever seen it before. So very cool.
Fair. Now, this may be an impossible question to answer for both of you. We know the ending to Infinity Saga, so we know the journey these characters take from the beginning to that point, and we see and get that payoff. Do you think there's potential for that for the characters we're getting introduced in Phase 4 to their ending point, apparently, or we assume, at a Phase 6? Do you think there's that chance of, not redemption, but maybe we can look back and be like, oh, now it kind of adds up or checks out?
Sure.
I know, impossible question to really answer because it's future stuff.
Anything's possible, Hope it happens. I can only speak to just how I felt after I watched the new ones, where I was like, I'm not as interested in following these new characters as much as I was the old ones. And the old ones, I don't have as much interest in following anymore, especially after things seem to wrap up pretty well for them in the last one.
Sure.
But, hope for the best.
That's a good answer. If I'm going to be honest with you, no, I don't think it can. I think how it feels to me is they're just introducing a bunch of cannon fodder. Okay. And if they do the right thing and they use the cannon fodder as cannon fodder and make all the rest of this about the villain, and it's just a long story about a villain just fucking slaughtering people, that could be really interesting. They won't do it because that's too big of a risk on their part and it wouldn't pay off. So no, I don't think we'll ever get to that point with these new casts, despite having some strengths in there for sure.
Okay. To follow up with that, do you think, from a personal standpoint, so I guess I'll ask, like, my personal feeling is this way for why Phase 4 may be lacking. I know we kind of wrapped up that topic, but we're finishing pulling it back in. Is we talked about connective tissue. Phase 1, if you look back at it, there's a lot of connective tissue. And for some reason with Phase 4, there doesn't seem to be a lot of connective tissue. Do you think maybe the lack of that being shown in Phase 4 could be part of the thing that's kind of holding it back and not making it feel as good or like it is meaningful?
I think it makes it maybe feel a little more directionless.
Okay.
Which isn't ideal if you're like engaged in the larger meta story. But I really think that like that wouldn't matter as much if the movies were just each great. Mm-hmm. Like if all these Phase 4 movies came out and were even more disconnected, but they were all great, I think that it wouldn't matter as much. But I think compounding that on top of the movies being less interesting, because there was a thing where with like some of the maybe lesser installments of the previous phases, you would watch them, and even if you didn't care quite as much, you'd watch it because you'd want to get greater context for what was coming next. I don't think that's the ideal way to watch a movie, but most of the times, like, the movies were good, so it wasn't a big deal. Mm-hmm. But now it's like you're sitting through these new movies that aren't as good, and so the other reason you would do that if you're not watching it just to watch a quality movie is because you want to see a quality meta-narrative form. And then if that's not forming, then the endeavor feels even more pointless, I think, for some people.
Fair.
Yeah, I would feel similarly. I think in a way, though, there is plenty of connective tissue in this phase, but it's just lazy.
Okay.
It's either just a throwaway line of dialogue or it's some half-assed thing that isn't well thought out. I think the thing about the initial phases with the connective tissue is, yeah, it was there, but it was usually well done. It wasn't completely necessary to like the film's success. Like the film could still stand on its own for the most part. I know like Iron Man 2 and Thor 2 were really just kind of vehicles for connective tissue, which is fine, whatever. um, but I just think that the connective tissue was there. It was better. It was more subtle, but better done, and then really paid off with the big group films like the Avengers. But then, like with Phase 4, it was just like so much, just like name dropping and throwing them just like these stupid half-ass little quips about other things, and it cheapened it a little bit. And also something you would think I would enjoy, but it became annoying, is basically every medium that I watched in Phase 4 somehow brought up Ant-Man, which I didn't understand, but he either appeared or someone mentioned Ant-Man almost by name. And I was like, why the hell are we doing this? Like, what is the point of this? It was very weird. I thought, actually, never mind. I'm not going to say what I was going to say. But yeah.
Okay. I think JC is alluding to something that just came out. No?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Well, I think I agree on the tangent you may have gone on.